So today's session is slightly different from Monday's because the focus today is very much on assessment and marking and the standard and so on. So there will be a little recap of the qualification at the beginning, but most of today is going to be about looking at scripts, looking at the standard, looking at how these papers are put together. Now, while we're in the chat box, oh, another one from Sri Lanka, you're very welcome. While we're in the chat box, just wonder if your centre is thinking of doing paper 1 and paper 2, the complete exam route, or paper 1 and paper 3, the exam and coursework. So just while we're going through today's agenda, if you could pop that into the chat box as well, that would be really helpful. So today we're looking at contents, assessment and marking, and a little bit at the end about support resources and questions. So our aims and objectives today, we're looking to understand the assessment objectives. You might hear me referring to those as in shorthand as AO for the specification A. We'll be looking at question types. We'll be going through, it's a very logical piece of training. This will just be walking through those papers. We'll be looking at the mark schemes, and we're going to practice using those mark schemes with some scripts. We'll be using the June 2023 paper, and I'll be telling you where to find those in your resources as we go through. And then we'll just look a little bit about some of the support provided by Pearson around assessment and exemplars towards the end, and talking about the examiner report. The principal examiner writes a report on each series. So it might also be good to just pop in the chat box if you're completely new. Oh, thank you for that. Oh, but you're just ahead of me. Well done. Thank you. Yeah, that's all good. So yeah, I'll cover the paper 2 and the coursework towards in the second half of the training, so you'll be able to make an informed decision about that, Alba. Thank you. So thinking about the contents of the specification, that's where we're going to go. We're going to talk a little bit about Pearson. We talked a bit about this on Tuesday. Just that we are about qualification, support and impact. It's about lifelong learning opportunities, setting our students up for their life, really. And as I said on Tuesday, Edexcel is part of Pearson Education. When I first started working for them too many years ago, possibly, I worked for Edexcel, which was the assessment wing. And Pearson was the publishing wing, and they've come together. That's why we're now known as Pearson Edexcel. But 150 years of international education experience, more than 3.4 million learners in 70+ countries. That's always a little bit mind-boggling. And 9 million scripts marked annually with exceptionally reliable results. And I can't even visualize what 9 million scripts looks like, but I know it's a lot. So just a quick reminder of how the qualification is put together. So there are 2 routes through this, but everyone does component 1. So that's our non-fiction text and transactional writing. It is the more heavily weighted of the routes through. Everybody has to do this. It's 60%, and everybody has to do the exam. The 2-hour, 15-minute exam, it has 90 marks. So there's a reading section and a writing section. The reading section has 5 questions. They're a mixture of short and long answer questions, and they're related to a non-fiction text from part 1 of the anthology and 1 previously unseen extract. And I'll be talking a little bit more about the anthology. But there are 45 marks for the reading questions 1 to 5, and then students have a choice of 2 questions for writing. It is transactional writing. They choose one of those 45-mark writing tasks from that choice of 2, and they know about the audience, form and purposes given to them in the question. So everybody does component 1. Then centres choose whether they want to do the exam route, which is component 2, or the coursework route, which is component 3. Whichever route you take, it's 40% of the total qualification. So if you choose the exam route, the reading is section A, and it's 130 mark essay question on a poetry or prose text, which they will have studied from the Pearson anthology. And then the writing section is a piece of imaginative writing. Again, it's worth 30 marks. Those sections are equally weighted on reading and writing for both papers. And they get a choice of 3 questions there. If you choose the coursework components, again, it's poetry and prose text and imaginative writing. Assignment A is 130 mark essay question based on 3 texts, poetry or prose, but they have to study at least 1 poetry and at least 1 prose they have to discuss in that essay. So they're looking at 3 extracts from the anthology text. And then again, assignment B is 130 mark imaginative writing task. So that's how the qualification is put together. Either component 1 and component 2, or component 1 and component 3, and that's the centre choice, which of those you choose to do. A little bit about the spoken language endorsement for the international qualification. This is not mandatory. It's a choice that centres make. We're not going to be talking too much about this today. We're just looking at the elements of the qualification that contribute to the final grade. The endorsement is it appears on the front of the certificate at either pass, merit, or distinction. I'm just going to let somebody else into the meeting. There we are. There are updates. There are benchmark recordings for that endorsement that you can find on the website, and Claire Haviland's updates on the endorsement as well. If you've got any questions about it, you're very welcome to ask them in the chat box. So just a quick reminder, we did a bit of this on Tuesday, but if you weren't here on Tuesday, this is just a bit of a reminder that students study a range of non-fiction and fiction texts from the Pearson Edexcel International GCSE Anthology, which can be ordered online. They develop skills in reading and understanding unseen non-fiction texts, that's in paper 1. They develop skills to analyse and compare different forms of writing, again in paper 1. They develop transactional writing skills for paper 1, imaginative writing skills for paper 2, and speaking and listening skills if you choose to do the endorsement. A little bit about the anthology. Parts 1 and 2, all of those extracts, and we'll be looking at what those are in a moment, must be taught for parts 1 and 2. This is SO6 in your download folder. It's at the heart of this qualification. So part 1 is used for paper 1, and part 2 is used for papers 2 and 3. Part 3 is used if you choose to do for ET, the IGCSE in English literature. They're ordered from the website. Students have a copy each for use in the classroom, and they need to be confident about all of those texts. So for paper 1, it's the non-fiction text. 1 text will appear in the exam paper, but they need to have studied all of them. And some of them are extracts and some of them are whole responses. The majority of them are extracts. And The Danger of a Single Story, A Passage to Africa. Now, A Passage to Africa is the one that appeared in the June 2023 paper, and that's the one we'll be working with a bit today. The Explorer's Daughter, Explorers or Boys Messing About, From Between a Rock and a Hard Place, Young and Dyslexic, A Game of Polo with a Headless Goat, Beyond the Sky and the Air, H is for Hawk, and Chinese Cinderella. And so those are part one of the anthology, and the text for part two, for paper two, or for coursework, are Disabled, Out, An Unknown Girl, The Bright Lights of Sarajevo, Still I Rise, The Story of an Hour, The Necklace, Significant Cigarettes, Whistle and I'll Come to You, and Nights. So if you're choosing the exam route, one of those will appear in the paper, and if you're choosing the coursework route, 3 of those you choose, or students choose to write their coursework. So that's just a reminder of the content. But today, our focus really is on assessment and marking, and that's what we're going to be focusing on for a lot of the training as we go through. So I'm going to now just be reminded a little bit about the assessment objectives. There are 3 reading assessment objectives covering understanding of text, critical analysis, and comparison. They're AO1, AO2, and AO3. And there are 2 writing assessment objectives covering content and structure and accuracy. And there's 1 spoken language assessment objective if you choose to do the spoken language endorsement. So a quick look at those, or a reminder. AO1, read and understand a variety of text, selecting and interpreting information, ideas and perspectives. 15% of the final grade on AO1. AO2, understand and analyze how writers use linguistic and structural devices to achieve their effects. And that's 20% of the final grade. AO3, which is the comparison assessment objective, explore links and connections between writers' ideas and perspectives, as well as how these are conveyed. That's only assessed in paper 1. And it's 15% of the final mark. It's question 5 on paper 1. AO4 and AO5, which are our 2 writing assessment objectives, communicate effectively and imaginatively, adapting form, tone, and register, of writing for specific purposes and audiences. So that's our transactional writing in paper 1 and imaginative writing in paper 2. AO5 is much more about the technical aspects, so it's write clearly using a range of vocabulary and sentence structures with appropriate paragraphing and accurate spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And those 2 assessment objectives, AO4 is 30%, AO5 is 20%. So we can see that the reading assessment objectives overall are 50% of the qualification, and the writing assessment objectives are 50% of the qualification. And AO6, the spoken language endorsement, is an endorsement on the front of the certificate. So the questions on paper 1 test the following. In section A, the reading, AO1, AO2, AO3, and in section 2, the writing, AO4 and AO5. So section A of paper 1, the reading section, these are the reading questions. We have a mixture of short answer and extended response questions. There are 3 short answer questions, and those are on the unseen text, on the text that students haven't studied. Then there's 1 extended response question on an anthology text, that's question 4, so they have studied it, and part 1 of the non-fiction text, and 1 comparison question, obviously on the unseen text and the anthology text. The anthology text is printed in the booklet, the exam booklet for students. These questions assess AO1, AO2, and AO3, and 45 marks across those 5 questions. So we're now going to look at paper 1, the AO1 questions 1 to 3. So we're going to be looking at paper 1, and in your download booklet, that is SO7, and we're going to be looking at the mark scheme for paper 1, which is SO8 in your download. So I'm going to give you a moment to reread the extract, the unseen extract, which was War Doctor, which is on page 22 of SO7, and to have a look at the question paper and mark scheme. So I'm just going to type that into the meeting chat and give you a couple of minutes to read through those before we go on to looking at examples of student responses for these questions from June 2023. So you'll hear me typing for a moment. Hope you've all had time to read through that. If you haven't, just pop it in the chat box if you need another minute or two. So the rest of this training is a very logical walk through papers 1, paper 2, and a little bit about the coursework. So we're going to start each of the questions with some comments from the principal examiner on that paper, SO7, that question paper from June 2023. So the principal examiner said the important advice for this question is to look at the line references given and to select single words or short phrases from the passage, not to attempt to use own words, and not to spend time giving comment or explanation which cannot be rewarded here. On the few occasions when both marks were not achieved, this was usually because the candidate had not looked at the correct lines and gave words and phrases from line 1. Others possibly misread the question and thought they had been asked to select words that described the war zones. If the given lines were simply copied out in full, then no marks could be awarded as no skills of selection had been demonstrated. So it's about students making a selection from the line references. So let's just have a look at this next slide isn't in the pack, so we're just going to look at it on the screen. We had a little look at this the other day. So the first candidate, the question was from lines 3 to 5, select 2 words or phrases that explain why David Knott works in war zones. So David Knott wants to help people, and David Knott likes the thrill. So we can see here that the response gains 2 marks. There are 2 appropriate quotations. They've been selected and they're clearly set out in the space provided. The second answer there, trouble and terrible places. The first word, trouble, comes from outside of the line references. And the phrase selected for the second point on its own doesn't answer the question. So unfortunately, that student, there are very few of them, but that student didn't get the marks for that one. So it's a very quick question. We're hoping that it will give students confidence in going through the paper. So we're now going to look at question 2. This is on page 3 of SO7. And we're going to follow the same structure of looking at the comments from the principal examiner and then looking at a response. The principal examiner said, it was clear that candidates had almost all clearly understood the events taking place, but where candidates did not score full marks, it tended to be because they were struggling to follow the instruction in your own words. Examiners reported that, as always, the most successful approach employed by candidates was to make at least 4 clear, discrete points. If these are set out separately, then it can help both the candidate and the examiner to see at a glance how many points have been made. It's important to remember that the question asks candidates to describe, and therefore, although it's not necessary to write at length, it is not acceptable to simply list very brief points. The response must be written in full and complete sentences that clearly demonstrate understanding and secure interpretation. And it's important that the given lines are read closely and carefully. So here we have, again, this one isn't in your download pack, but here we have an example. So the question was, look again at lines 26 to 41. In your own words, describe what happens. And this student has written, someone opened the door to the surgery. The hospital was to be bombed, so they were on there were orders to leave the building. The doctor is conflicted in whether to leave his patient or not. And after deliberating with himself, he chooses to stay. So thinking about that one, it's clear. It's a nice succinct response. It makes 4 straightforward, valid points. And if we look in our mark scheme, we can see the bullet points there, and this student has met bullet points 1, 2, 7, and 8. The points are clearly set out on the page. It's making it very clear for the examiner, And so this student got the 4 marks. Very clearly done, isn't it? So nice response there. Again, the expectation is that students will gain these AO1 marks very easily, questions 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so going on to question 3, you might again just want to remind yourself of what it says in the exam paper. And we're going to follow the same structure, looking at the examiner report first, and then looking at the a response. So in the examiner report, again, the principal examiner says in question 3, candidates are told that they may support their points with brief quotations, and the vast majority did so to good effect. Examiners noted that many candidates scored 4 marks on this question, having been taught to select quotations carefully and explain the content rather than the language, because the language is question 4. In summary, the best answers used a good balance of short quotation and some interpretation, paid attention to how many marks the question was worth, and made 5 clear and discrete points, often set out separately, which, as with question 2, can be useful to both candidate and examiner. So here we have an example. This is the full response to this question. I'm going to give you a minute or so to just read through that and see if you can spot those bullet points from the mark scheme. So just give you a while just to think about which bullet points have been met, where they've been met. The mark scheme, just a reminder, is SO3 in your pack. And then I'll give you a little heads up afterwards as to which bullet points were met. Remember, there are 5 marks available here. So which number of bullet points can you find in that response? If anyone would like to pop a mark in, they're very welcome to do that. If you want to look at your own marking. So that one does actually, it is a 4 mark response. It picks a number of the bullet points, doesn't it? It actually meets 6 of the bullet points. Meets bullet points 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Yeah, it is a great response, Alba. You're absolutely right. Yeah, this student has absolutely nailed it, haven't they? You know, we can't give 6 out of 5, but this candidate did get 5 out of 5. So yes, it's a very good response. Okay, so following our logical walk through this this paper 1, we're now moving on to question 4. So we're now moving from the unseen text to the text that candidates have studied. So this was the George Alagiah text from the anthology. Hopefully you're familiar with that. If you're not, well, give you a moment in a minute to have a quick look at it. But following that logical structure, we're going to look at the demands, the requirements of this question 4. It's worth 12 marks. So obviously, the previous questions, the AO1 questions, are worth 11 marks overall for questions 1, 2, and 3. Question 4, students have studied this text. They don't know which one will appear, but it is printed for them. And we're now moving to AO2, which is our analysis of language and structure, and it's 12 marks. So we're requiring here a more detailed and developed response. They need to comment on the writer's use of language and structure, but it's not just random quotations or random comments about language and structure. The question has got a focus. So it's important that students look at what the focus of the question is, make their points relevant. Language points might cover things like word choice and their impact, types of language, techniques, similes, metaphors. We all know these as English teachers. The effect of these must be considered, how they contribute to the tone, to reader engagement, so that focus that they're asked to write on. Structural points can cover things like sentence length and structure, rhetorical questions, paragraphing, change of focus. We all know these kind of things, circular structure. We all know what these structural features are. But again, the purpose and effect of these should always be considered. So the question is, again, we're talking about SO7 in the download pack. That's the question paper, and the question is on page 5. So the question was, how does the writer George Alagiah use language and structure in text 2 to shock the reader? So that's our focus. You should support your answer with close reference to the extract, including brief quotations. So the comments from the principal examiner for the June 2023 paper was there does not need to be an equal number of points on language and structure, but both should be addressed, as indeed they were by nearly all candidates. It was evident to examiners that most candidates had a secure knowledge of this text and could approach the question with confidence. At the lower levels, candidates either identified features of language and sometimes structure, but offered little explanation of their effect or described and made general comments on the text, failing to focus on how the writer shocks the reader. Mid-level candidates tended to work through the text, made a sound range of points, and selected apt textual references for support, but often did not move on to analyze closely the impact or connotations of the individual words or phrases, or fully considered the effects of the structural features. The most successful responses dealt with the whole passage and made many insightful points, with candidates selecting the textual references judiciously from throughout the text. One examiner noted that the analysis of the impact of the smile was often a discriminator, with candidates referring to Alagiah's epiphany moment. So we're just going to have a quick look at the mark scheme, because we've now moved on to, rather than a points-based mark scheme, we've moved on to a levels-based mark scheme. And so we've got 5 levels. The first bullet point is about the language and structure, and the second bullet point in the mark scheme is about the references. So we can see here that there's basic identification and little understanding. of language and structure. To achieve effect in level 1, some understanding and comment. In level 2, and the references there would be valid, clear understanding and explanation. In level 3, with appropriate references. Level 4, thorough understanding and exploration. And then the references would be detailed and appropriate. And in level 5, we're looking at perceptive understanding and analysis of language and structure and discriminating references. We touched on this a little bit on Tuesday. So what we've got now is a little marking exercise. So it's going to be over to you for a little bit. We're looking now at the delegate booklet, which is SO2 in your download pack. There are 3 scripts in there. They're labelled 4A, 4B and 4C. We're looking now at pages 2 to 9. So there's a little bit of reading to do here. I'm going to tell you we've got a level 3, a level 4 and a level 5. But I'm not going to tell you which one is which. So have a little look through 4A, 4B and 4C in SO2, the download pack. Which one is a level 3, which one is a level 4 and which one is a level 5. So 7 pages of reading to do there. So I'm going to mute and I'll just pop that exercise in the chat for everyone. And if you want to be daring enough to say whether 4A, 4B or 4C, which one is the level 3, which is the level 4 and which is the level 5. These are from the examiner report, so we don't have precise marks, we just have the levels for these. So I'll mute and pop that into the chat box. I hope you've all had time to have a look at 4A, 4B and 4C. Just pop in the chat box if you need a little bit more time. I'm hoping I've timed that about right for you to read those, but I can't, nothing coming into the chat box. So let's have a look at the commentaries for these, which will help you distinguish between these levels. So 4A, this is our level 3 response. The candidate makes points about the use of graphic imagery, repetition, short sentences and longer sentences, which contain some strong vocabulary, all being intended to shock the reader. Now we can see in that one, that word from level 3, explanation. And I think this will help you distinguish between them. If we think of those key words, clear understanding, but points, although supported by relevant references, lack development. So it is a response that explains. So a mark in the middle of level 3 was given for this. And there's a nice little examiner tip from the examiner report there. To achieve above level 3, aim to develop points. For example, the above response, in the above response, the candidate might have explored how exactly the list of descriptive words selected create a disturbing picture. So that's a level 3 response with that word explain. 4B, this one is the level 5 because it meets all of level 4 criteria. And then we're looking at, can we push it over that boundary? So this candidate has produced a thorough and very thoughtful answer, which makes a number of relevant and wide-ranging points about language and structure. Note how this candidate examines, for example, the language of Like a Ghost Village in a way that the level 3 response does not. This response also considers Alagaya's view of his role as a journalist. All of the level 4 criteria are met, but the response does not have the degree of analysis or perception needed for a mark in level 5. So top level 4 for script 4B. Again, circling keywords in the question can help to ensure an appropriate focus with our examiner tip there. And then this very good one, 4C, which is a lovely response. It's obviously hopefully you thought this, it's perceptive, so it's obviously a level 5 response. This impressive response contains a number of perceptive and insightful points. So hopefully we're seeing the difference between explain, explore, perceptive, and this one is analytical, and demonstrates an extremely good understanding of the impact of the smile. The candidate is discriminating in their selection of references and offers some analysis of a range of language and structural features, such as the use of detail, short, sharp sentence, triplet of adjectives, and repetition, which are all covered on the first page. Points are often developed with close examination of word choice. The response not only considers how Alagaya is moved by what he sees, but also looks at how the reader is affected by the way in which the piece is written. This fulfills all of level 5. So lovely, lovely response there. Okay, so that brings us to the end of question 4, our AO2. So now we're moving on to AO3, question 5. So we're moving from AO2 to AO3. The question is on page 9 of SO7. And the question was, compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives about their experience. So now we're working with the unseen text and the text that students have studied. We're working with those 2 extracts. Support your answer with detailed examples from both texts, including brief quotations. So the requirements of this question, compare is the command verb of the question. So it's a good idea to introduce comparative points right from the start. That kind of answer that says both texts. Candidates will be asked to compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives. So need to consider the author's viewpoints, attitudes, thoughts and opinions about their subject matter. Candidates should look for points of both similarity and difference and support what they say with evidence from the text. The indicative content section of the mark scheme for the specimen papers gives a good idea of the kind of comments that candidates could make. So following our pattern, we're now moving on to comments from the principal examiner. And then we're going to have a little talk about what do we mean by ideas and perspectives. The principal examiner said about this question, at the lower end, candidates tended to focus on obvious links between the texts, such as both being set in war zones, both featuring a sick little girl, both being first-person accounts. Often these answers gave a point, perhaps supported by a quotation, but with no development, quickly moving on to making another point. Some candidates at this level retold the events of each text, sometimes with greater emphasis on one text rather than focusing on comparison or examining the perspectives and experiences of the narrators. The more successful responses focused almost immediately on comparing specific details of the extracts and looked at the writer's perspectives as well as their ideas. Many candidates identified the essential difference between not as someone giving direct life-saving assistance and risking his life to do so, and Alagaya as an observer, but able to raise awareness through his writing. There are different ways to approach this question, but examiners noted that the most successful responses made each point a valid and appropriate comparison with supporting references from both extracts. This led to the balance required for marks within levels 4 and 5. Where candidates dealt with one passage at length before moving on to the second, they often failed to make many actual points of comparison. So a little bit now about ideas and perspectives. In the examiner reports and the mark schemes, it's been noted that students need to compare both ideas and perspectives of the author. So when we're thinking about perspectives, we're thinking perhaps about attitudes. Where most students can pick up on the ideas of the text, it's important that they think about perspectives. This is something obviously to introduce in the teaching of text 2 and then remind students to look for it when they're reading the unseen text in the exam. Think about what you would include when you're teaching perspective of the author, thinking about tone, opinion, point of view, intended reader, all of those things. Okay, so we're just going to have as we have before, we're going to have a little run through the mark scheme for question 5. We did do this very briefly as well on Tuesday, so hopefully you'll be familiar with this. So 5 levels. We've got playing with 22 marks here, so it's a big tariff question. So in level 1, students wouldn't be comparing. In level 2, there would be obvious comparisons. In level 3, a range. In level 4, a wide range. And again, we're going to exemplify this in a moment. And in level 5, a varied and comprehensive range. The second bullet point deals with the ideas and perspectives. So in level 1, it would be descriptive. In level 2, there would be comment. In level 3, explanation, as we saw before. In level 4, exploration. And in level 5, analysis. And the third bullet point in the mark scheme refers to the references. And in level 1, they'd be limited. Level 2, valid. Level 3, appropriate. Level 4, they'd be balanced and they'd fully support the ideas. And in level 5, they'd also be balanced, but they would be discriminating and fully support the ideas. So now we're moving on to our marking activity for question 5. We've got here, again, for you, with 3 scripts. They're 5A, 5B, 5C. They're in SO2, the delegate booklets. They're pages 13 to 22. Again, we've got a level 3, 4, and 5. Which one is which? So I'm going to mute for a little bit longer. We've got 9 pages to read here. And I'm conscious of the time because we're on question 5 of paper 1 and we have paper 2 to do. although we don't need to do the mark schemes in quite so much detail because we've looked at the assessment objectives. So I'm going to mute for, again, probably 6 minutes and ask you to make a judgment about which is level 3, which is level 4, which is level 5. And I'll pop that into what we're doing into the chat. Thank you. Okay, so I hope you've had a little decision. I can see a bit of comment on this in the chat, which is always excellent. So 5A, best fit. This is at level 3. So the expression at times is a little bit awkward, isn't it? But the candidate does explain there are relevant comparative points on the number of people affected by the situations described and different emotions felt by the writers. The final paragraph only covers text 1. Best fit, and it's obviously a tool that examiners use, the best fit approach. Where does it best fit? And it does best fit in the middle of level 3. So a good approach is, this is the examiner tip, to make sure there are points of comparison in every paragraph with supporting references from both texts. The 5B script, this is a top level 4. This candidate writes in a succinct and precise way and displays an assured understanding of the two extracts. The opening sentence immediately links the two texts and then moves into exploring, so more than explaining, it's exploring the initial points raised. The reference to how a lack of censorship allows both extracts to fully portray the horrors is astute, and the candidate goes on to look at how this ties into authorial intent. Further points about the writers, disgust, reasoning, and differing emotions in the aftermath of key incidents are made convincingly. References are generally balanced across both texts, although there are a couple of points where evidence is weighted towards one of them, but it does meet all the level 4 criteria. So that examiner tip there is very good. Ensure that your introductory sentences offer some clear links, so that straight away you're hitting that AO3, that assessment objective for this one. And 5C, right, following a clear plan, the candidate presents an extremely full and detailed response with excellent analysis of language and perspective. Salient themes and ideas have been carefully selected, and quotations are interwoven skillfully into the answer to support and enhance points. There is a varied and comprehensive range of comparisons, and 4 marks are deserved. And there's that little hint there that possibly for students, a plan would be helpful to encourage them to make significant points. So we're moving away now from the reading questions. We're moving now to the writing questions. So on paper 1, AO4 and AO5 are assessed in questions 6 and 7, but students only pick one of those questions. So students are advised to spend about 45 minutes on this question. One writing task from a choice of 2. The focus is transactional writing, so articles for newspapers, magazines, speeches, letters, and so on. 45 marks available for this writing question. So this is section B, and the questions for the June 2023 paper were, by helping others, we can also help ourselves and our communities. So we can see that loosely the extracts act as a springboard for these questions, but it is only it's a loose connection. Write a guide, so there's our text type, for young people suggesting ways in which they might help other people. Your guide may include suggestions as to who might be helped, ways in which helping others can help us and our communities, and any other points you wish to make. So there's a scaffold there if students want to use it, and then students are reminded that your response will be marked for the accurate and appropriate use of vocabulary, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So again, the principal examiner's points, a few of them, these are from the examiner reports. So we've chosen question 7 for today rather than question 6 because, I didn't go through question 7. A magazine is inviting readers to send in an article about people, places, or things that they will never forget. Write the article that you would submit to the magazine. Your article may include a description of people, places, or things you will never forget, an explanation of why they were so memorable, and any other points you wish to make. So question 7 last June was the more popular of these two questions. More candidates chose that in the exam, which is why we're going to have a look at the question 7 today. It invited candidates to write a magazine article about the people, places, or things that they will never forget. At the lower end, some candidates seemed unsure as to the requirements of the text type and form of writing. Some responses were narrative, with little reference to what actually made what the candidate was writing about memorable, whilst others seemed to be trying to persuade their readers to visit a particular place. Following the bullet points of the question might have been helpful in such instances. Some responses at this level were limited by candidates' erratic control of punctuation, with comma splices being particularly prevalent. Better responses were about memories that were impactful, emotional, and actually meant something to the candidate. It was felt that a little planning paid dividends, and that where students narrowed the parameters and concentrated on either people or places or things without trying to cover all three, or where they had planned so that there was some cohesion between the different things they covered, their answers were more successful. So we're just going to have a look now at the AO4 comments. So to achieve the highest level in AO4, writing needs to be perceptive, subtle, and sophisticated, and there should be a clear focus on the appropriate form. And then for AO5, candidates should consider the ordering of their ideas, writing clear paragraphs, and aim to link them effectively. There needs to be accuracy, but also a strategic use of an extensive vocabulary and an assured and controlled use of a range of sentence structures to achieve particular effects. Candidates should not avoid using an ambitious vocabulary because they fear making spelling mistakes. Those who did achieve higher level marks frequently open their piece with an intriguing question, a powerful statement, or a short sentence, and proceeded to explore and develop their ideas with fluency, clarity, and enthusiasm. Candidates are advised that colloquialisms such as gonna and wanna should only be employed in direct speech. So a quick look at these mark schemes. So this is the AO4 mark scheme. We can see there that the first bullet point is about communication. Basic in level 1, broadly appropriate in level 2, clear in level 3, successful in level 4, and perceptive and subtle in level 5. And then the purpose is in the second bullet point, little awareness, a grasp, a clear sense, a secure realization, and sharply focused up there in level 5. And then the third bullet point is about form, tone, and register, little awareness in level 1, straightforward in level 2, appropriate in level 3, effective in level 4, and sophisticated in level 5. So that's the communication assessment objective. And then we go on to AO5, which is how the candidate has expressed themselves. And we can see there that the first one is about expression. I'll leave you to read through how those move up, orders, develops, connects, manages, manipulates. And then the second bullet point is about vocabulary, basic, some, varied, wide selective, extensive, as we go up through those levels. And then the third bullet point is about the punctuation, basic, some control, accurate and varied, a range for clarity, and then punctuation, writing with accuracy to aid emphasis and precision. And that one also talking about sentence types and structures. Okay, so we're moving on now to question 7. And I think we'll just look at one of these. We're going to look at 7A. So there are 3 scripts, but there's a lot of reading in those, so aware of time, but obviously you'll have them to read afterwards. So we're just going to have a look at 7A, the first script in the pack, and see what you think of that. So I'll just write that in the chat. I'll just mute for a a couple of minutes. It's on page 26 of SO2. So hopefully you've had a chance to look through 7A in your pack. The commentary here is it's perhaps unfortunate that the candidate crossed out their initial attempt at this question, as actually it focuses more closely on the demands of the task. Their final response is more of a sketchy narrative, and although there is reference to a person who will never be forgotten, it is slight and there is no real detail to convince or engage. As such, this response does not really move beyond broadly appropriate, some grasp of purpose and straightforward, and so is best placed at the top of level 2 for AO4. It is written with clarity and a fair degree of technical accuracy, and just moves into level 3 for AO5. So that whole thing about planning. And I can just see there's a comment there in the chat, so I'm just going to have a quick look. Yeah, that's a good comment, Albert. Thank you. Now, we haven't got time to look at 7B or 7C, but these are in your pack and the commentaries are in the examiner report. So just so you've got some benchmarks, we're going to tell you that 7B, just for AO4 moves into level 4, and for AO5 at the top of level 3. And then 7C is all level 4 has been met for both assessment objectives, and there's enough to move into level 5 for both AO4 and AO5. So you can look at those ones at your leisure. So that brings us to the end of paper 1. So let's move on to paper 2. Obviously, we don't have as much time for this because we've already looked at the assessment objectives in some detail for paper 1. So for paper 2, there are just 2 questions. There's section A, poetry and prose, which is one essay question on the anthology text from the second part of the anthology that assesses AO1 and AO2, and it's worth 30 marks. And section B is the imaginative writing. It's a creative response, again assessing the writing assessment objectives, AO4 and AO5, and there are 30 marks available, 18 for AO4 and 12 for AO5. So we can see here where they're assessed, and we're going to move on now to look at question 1. So anthology text, one of those will appear for the students. How does the writer create sympathy for the boy in Out Out? This was the June 2023 question. In your answer, and it's scaffolded and the word there is should, you should write about how the saw and the boy's reaction to the accident are presented, how the other people in the poem react to the accident, and the use of language and structure. You should support your answer with close reference to the poem, including brief quotations. So obviously we're assessing AO1, the reading and understanding of the text and the ideas and perspectives, and AO2, the ability to analyse language and structure. So we've got some feedback here on both AO1 and AO2 on separate slides. The examiner said that for AO1, the first 2 bullet points in the mark scheme relate to AO1, and this is, I have to say, for the June 2023 paper, it will be slightly different for the June 2024 paper, so we just need to keep that in mind. Selecting and interpreting information, ideas and perspectives. The level of understanding of the text from the anthology is assessed in the first bullet point, and the selection and interpretation of information, ideas and perspectives in the text in the second bullet point. It was noted that candidates had varying knowledge of the poem. If they scored high, they were able to comment on effects of specific phrases and language and how they emphasized the tragedy of the boy's death, as well as the setting and reactions surrounding it. More basic responses focused on the portrayal of the soul and physical harm it did, overlooking the human tragedy. And the least successful, as of course will always be the case, is that they tend to be narrative, and they didn't really move past the accident, some of them were speculative, and so on. And then the AO2 comments, the more successful ones were able to name and discuss the range of language, structure, and form devices. Candidates usually have plenty to say about what the way the saw was presented and the rich variety of techniques used by Frost to make it seem threatening and vicious. Personification, powerful verbs, repetition, onomatopoeia were often identified and their impact on the reader. The third bullet point of the mark scheme relates to AO2, but then again, we are talking about the 2023 mark schemes. I don't want to labour that too much because we're going to have a little look in a moment at the new mark schemes. So for June 2023, the mark scheme looked like this, and it was an integrated mark scheme out of 30 for AO1 and AO2. But we're moving on, and in 2024, the mark scheme, those mark schemes are going to be separated. So AO1 is going to have a mark out of 12, And there'll be 4 levels in the mark scheme for this June. And we can see there, it's about reading and understanding text. We're talking about understanding. We're talking about how they use the information. And we're talking about the references as we go up through that mark scheme. And then the AO2 mark scheme is going to be out of 18. And this is the analytical AO2, language and structure. And so it's about the identification and how they're analyzing that and how they're exploring the effects of it. So there are going to be 5 levels in the new mark scheme for June 2023 out of a total of 18. So we call these the new mark schemes. They just a reminder that it was 1 grid, it's now gone to 2 grids. The sample assessment materials, which you have in your download pack, they have been amended to reflect this amendment. So they now have the 2 mark schemes in them. So we're going to have a look now at script 1A. It's a nice script. It's on page 39 of SO2. There are lots more examples. We're only going to look at this one. There are lots of examples in the examiner report for paper 2. The examiner report for paper 2 is SO12 in your download pack. But we're just going to look at 1A. So I'll give you a few minutes to look at 1A. And I'll tell you it is level 5. It's not at the top of level 5, but it is in level 5. So I'll just mute and I'll just pop those directions. Page 39 of SO2, I'll just pop them into the chat. Hoping you enjoyed that response. So, a nice response, not quite 4 marks. So let's have a think about the mark that it did get. So it begins with a clear overview of the poem. It's immediately evident that this is a candidate who knows this poem, who studied this poem. Definitely perceptive understanding of the text. For example, on the first page, the idea of the contrast between the man and the child, reinforcing the cruel nature of child labour, which then moves on to discuss the pleading tone. Don't let him cut my hand off. On the second page, the candidate again uses the idea of forced labour, but this adds little to the ongoing points. The point here about resentment is not fully explored and not completely convincing. So these are the things that are keeping it from the top of level 5. The third page returns to well-exemplified analysis with comments about the impact of both the caesura and the enjambment. Perceptive understanding is shown in the comments, such as the unnerving lack of sentimental feelings, but an ominous atmosphere. If we're thinking about everything this candidate does, it's all pretty sound, isn't it? Mostly perceptive understanding and analysis of language and structure. So a fair mark for this is a mark of 28, securely in level 5, not quite at the top of level 5. Okay, but hopefully a very nice, enjoyable script to have a read of there. So now thinking about thinking about questions 2, 3, and 4, and there's a choice here. There's always a choice of the imaginative writing for students. This is the June 2023 paper. Choice of 3 questions. Write about a time when you or someone you know met up with family or friends. Students are always told that their response can be real or imagined, and then they're always signposted to the AO5. So your response will be marked for the accurate and appropriate use of vocabulary, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. The second one was write a story with the title The Sunset Experience. And the third one, look at the images provided, write a story that begins, the mountain looked impossibly high. So there would always be a choice of 3. So comments from the principal examiner said that the main areas that discriminated the writing responses were whether candidates could meet both parts of the first part of bullet 1 in the mark scheme for AO5. So it's about expressing ideas to achieve in level 2. In level 3, that the connected ideas not developed, successful tone, style, and register, spelling is basic, those kind of things. Sentence structure was clearly an area centres had focused on, varying the way sentences begin, more use of subordinate clauses to begin complex sentences, effective use of one-word sentences. So all the things that they're taught, I suppose, to recognise in that question 4 on paper 1, they're actually using in their own writing. Key message there for centres is to focus on crafting and organisation, whatever the nature of the task. So there's some useful comments there from the examiner report. And you do have that examiner report in your download. So we don't need to spend long here on the mark schemes. They are the same assessment objectives as on paper 1, just the mark is different. So if you remember, on paper 1, it's 27 plus 18. On this paper, it's 18 plus 12, but the words within the levels are, of course, the same. So that's our AO4, and this is our AO5. So we're now going to look at a question for question 2. This is script 2A. So in SO2, this is page 48. it's 4 pages, but it's easy to read. It's very easy to read, very readable. So script 2A, page 48 on SO2. Again, I'll mute for a couple of minutes and pop that into the chat, and just thinking about where you might put this one. Thank you. Hopefully you've had enough time to have a read through that one. This is a level 4 response for both AO4 and AO5. If we think about the AO5, it does meet the bullet points of 1 and 2. It in that level 4 communicates successfully. It does fulfill its purpose. the first part of the script, the use of form, tone, and register is quite impressive, but it sort of tails off a little bit, doesn't it? It gets less impressive, which is why it's not quite making it to the top mark in the level. Begins sharply, drama ahead. There's that little. Let's have a read of this one. Followed by 3 paragraphs, each one devoted to some detailed description. We've got the characters, the anticipated drama, got a bit of storytelling. James's pictures is leaving that trail of unintentional casualties in his wake. Sorry, excuse me. Paragraph 5, there's a nice tongue-in-cheek bit of direct address. AO4 meets all the bullet points, some more securely than others. Punctuation is clear. There's a sense of candidate having a little bit of a rush at the end, a little bit of lack of control when they're probably running out of time at that point. But nice response in level 4. Okay, so we're going to move on now to just having a little think about if any of you are going for the coursework route. And just a reminder here that the requirements for the coursework paper 3 are different to the requirements for the exam route paper 2, and that the requirements have changed. So this, again, there's an amendment here. It's 130 mark essay question based on 3 poetry or prose texts from part 2. 1 has to be poetry, 1 has to be prose, and then the candidate can choose the 3rd one. Previously, those any of you already doing the spec, it was 2 and a commentary, but that has changed. Assignment B is the same, imaginative writing, 130 mark response there. So just a little bit about the requirements. This page is a screenshot. It's page 81 of the sample assessment materials. And the sample assessment materials are SO5 in your download pack. So this is just a screenshot that talks you through. This has been amended in the light of the specification change. So you can see there that the first bold word is 3. But you can find that, as I said, on page 81 of SO5. So we've got a sample task here. Discuss how the writers use language and structure to present, insert chosen focus in Anthology 1, Anthology 2, Anthology 3. In your response, you should discuss the ideas and perspectives of the writers about the chosen focus, discuss how the writers use language and structure to achieve their effects, and include textual references to illustrate the points you have made. And you should title your work. Now that is again from the sample assessment materials, SO5. And if you're jotting down page numbers, that one is page 80. There's also a guidance sheet. Again, this is from the sample assessment materials. This is page 89. This is for the imaginative writing. So it's about how to choose an assignment, how to choose form, tone, and register appropriately for purpose and audience, all of those things. So just to say again, that's page 89 of the sample assessment materials, SO5, in your download pack. So again, we have a sample assessment for you. So write about a time when you or someone you know, where you reunited with friends or family. Your response could be real or imagined. In your response, you should describe ideas, events, setting, and characters. Use appropriate techniques for creative writing, vocabulary, imagery, language techniques. Use a voice that attempts to make the piece interesting and/or believable to the chosen audience. Use a register and style appropriate for the chosen form, which may include colloquial elements, dialogue within description or narrative, or a sustained single voice in a monologue. You should title your work. Your response will be marked for the accurate and appropriate use of vocabulary, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So the signposting there to the AO5. So again, you'll find this in the sample assessment materials I've just been referring to. So in the pack, it's the document labeled SO3. There are 2 assignment A examples with mark schemes and commentaries. We're not going to have time to look at those today, but they are there for you. And so there's something that you can look at in your own time. The commentaries are in the folders for that, in SO3 for that. So you can look at those at your leisure. So moving on to, those are the commentaries, but you'll find those in the pack, SO3. Spoken language endorsement, as we've said, is optional for the international IGCSE. But there's plenty of information about that on the website. So we're going to just move on for our last few minutes together to talk about the support that's available to you from Pearson. We did do these very, very briefly on Tuesday. So we can see there that this is a screenshot of the page from the website, that there are the specification and the sample assessment materials. We're looking at specification 6, sample assessment materials 3, 128 exam materials. Just a reminder that there's the main paper, which is 01, and as you can see where it says exemplar material, 01R, which is the regional paper. They are of the same standard, they're just regional because of the time zones. Then you can see there are 80 things in teaching and learning materials that you can look at. There are course planners and so on. So just if you're new to the spec, just have a little look around. There's plenty to support you, lesson plans and so on that we talked a little bit about on Tuesday. Then there are some published resources. You don't need to use those at all, but they are available if you wish. So there is a student book and a teacher pack. Access to scripts. This is a free online portal, and I'm just going to go through these very quickly because I did cover them in Tuesday's training. But obviously on results day, you can go in and you can immediately access your students' news scripts on results day and see how they did on each of the questions. Also provides, obviously you have to have student permission to look at those, but it allows you to do lots of things, to look at lots of things, but it can also help your teaching and learning, help you to see where students are doing better on the papers, where they're not doing so well, and target your teaching appropriately. Results Plus, that platform is an analysis tool. You can see student performance, you can see benchmark your school against other Pearson schools in your country. You can look at girls versus boys if you're a mixed school. It does all kinds of things. You know, there are lots of things you can do there, and there are some little videos that will show you what you can do. So again, a very, very useful tool. Then there's Exam Wizard, which is another free platform that allows you to make homework tasks, allows you to create question papers, things that appear there much sooner. So, for example, the latest question papers and mark schemes will appear there before they'll appear on the general website. Claire Havilands. Now, Claire, as I said the other day, is she's a subject advisor for all things English. So there's English language IGCSE specification A, specification B, the home GCSE, the international A level, the home A level. She's an excellent fount of knowledge. There are all kinds of things you can do there. You can follow her on Twitter, you can email her, contact her, you can get the subject advisor updates, which are very useful, give you all the latest updates on the specifications. You can book an appointment with her if you need to know more things, and she always replies to her email really, really quickly. So she's an excellent source after today's training.